You probably heard on the air, off the air, having a discussion with Congressman Ted Poe, who is live in the studio with us. Congressman Poe, welcome back to Houston's Morning News. I am always excited when you come in, and I love the fact that you take the time to come in. How was the Chipotle the last time that you were here?
Well, it was good in the sense that after we left here, got stranded because of the rain, and that's a good place to be stranded.
I guess that's not too bad. It's nice to have Chipotle doing business in this country. You've probably heard that we now have, and I'm sure you're very excited about this, the highest corporate tax rate of any country on the face of the planet. 39%, followed by Japan at 38%, Mexico coming in at 30%, and I saw the president with the president of Mexico, and we should be excited about this, Congressman, right?
Well, we should be concerned about it. 40%. Think about that. 40% of the income to any business goes to the federal government. That doesn't count all the other taxes that they pay. That is outrageous. And people talk about, well, those businesses, those American businesses are leaving town. They're going somewhere else. They're going overseas. Well, one of the reasons is we're putting them out of business with the corporate tax rate. They can go somewhere else with a lower tax rate and actually make a profit and hire people in foreign countries. So it's long since overdue for us to reduce the corporate tax rate down to 20 or 25% so businesses stay here, hire more people. Federal government has to live within its means. Actually, some say that if even the tax rate's lower, it'll produce more revenue for the federal government.
Well,
so
now,
time to do it.
In all fairness, businesses find ways to lower their taxes. There's loopholes. There's tax incentives and so on and so forth. So not every business may be paying that 39 to 40% interest rate. But I agree with you. If we lower the corporate tax rate, would you be for lowering the corporate tax rate and then getting rid of all the tax incentives like the president keeps saying big oil is getting? Let's get rid of all of that and lower the corporate tax rate.
Well, we need to lower the corporate tax rate, and we need to make the tax system fair. And I mean by that, cut out the loopholes. And there are so many. We have to go through them and look at each one of them and eliminate those loopholes. But make it simpler, and then while we're doing it, do the same thing for citizens, individual taxpayers. Make it simple for them with one or two tax rates and eliminate most of those deductions except charitable deduction, home mortgage, and maybe one or two others. Make the tax system simpler in the United States.
Now, you and I, we're talking about taxes here today. Of course, April 15th is coming up. Americans are going to have to pay that tax bill. A lot of Americans will be getting refunds back. But a lot of Americans are paying their taxes while a lot of other Americans are sitting around sucking up all those tax dollars. I agree with you. We need to come up with a fair way to tax American workers. Will that ever happen, Congressman? I always hear people talking about it during election years, but it never seems to come to fruition.
Well, I think it will happen. There's already actually talk in Congress about reducing the rate, not just the corporate tax rate, but the individual tax rate. And we do have a problem because you have almost 50% of the people, I understand, not paying any income tax.
Right.
And when that gets to be so large that those people continue to vote higher taxes for those that do pay and they don't pay, it's going to be difficult to have a fair tax. I think if you live in this country, you ought to pay something. I don't know what it ought to be, but you should be able to help support the country and pay some form of tax. And 50% of the public should not be paying zero tax or little tax.
I agree. Congressman Ted Poe joining us here. All right, former judge. I got to ask you about President Obama and whether or not he's intimidating the Supreme Court of the United States. We are joined in studio by Congressman Ted Poe. Congressman Poe, thank you so much for joining us.
Always good to see you.
Always good to see you, too. All right, I want to play something here for you and get your thoughts on it. Here we go.
An unelected group of people would somehow overturn a duly constituted and passed law. Well, there's a good example.
All right, the president says that we've got an unelected group of people that could turn over a duly elected law, Obamacare he's talking about, a veiled threat against the Supreme Court. As a former judge, how would you take that?
I would be insulted if I was a member of the Supreme Court. The president taught constitutional law. He certainly understands how the system works.
Do you think he really does?
Yes, I think he does.
Okay.
And it sounds a little intimidation to the Supreme Court. maybe almost to the level of, well, don't do this,
Right.
because there may be some repercussions.
Yeah, he's talking about judicial activism and how conservatives are against judicial activism, but he's talking about the Supreme Court. This is part of our government. This is 1/3 of our government here. I mean, he's supposed to understand how this country works.
And he appointed two members of that Supreme Court.
Right.
It's real simple. The president suggests and appoints a member. They have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate, and they become a member of the Supreme Court. And that's how those 9 folks got on the Supreme Court. They did it the constitutional way. And there's a little case that we all learned first in law school, a case from 1803, Marbury versus Madison, which is the concept of judicial review by the Supreme Court of laws passed by the legislative body and signed by the president. And then they can rule those unconstitutional if they violate the Constitution. And that's probably the first, maybe the only case most lawyers know. And therefore, the Supreme Court's doing what they're supposed to do, review this case, this Obamacare, to see whether the mandate is constitutional. I don't think it is. We will see what they do sometime this summer. So the president, I just don't understand why he now is complaining about the Supreme Court of the United States when they haven't even ruled yet.
Well, they haven't had a good relationship. I mean, you do remember that State of the Union address where he was calling them out. And so I guess there's always been a little tension between the. I don't think this president likes anybody that does anything that would go against what he believes is good for the country.
Well, he certainly doesn't want the Supreme Court to throw out his landmark case. Probably, I think this case being heard by the Supreme Court is the most important case in our lifetime.
No question.
It could change the role of government from being a limited government to an unlimited government if they rule that it's constitutional. So, but it's interesting how the president is just sort of talking down to the Supreme Court on this case. He thinks he may lose, I guess.
I think he will. I want to thank you again for your time.